Hey everybody, my name is Marvin. I will be responding to Andrew Pry's main claim: minimum wage should stay the same or else our economy would suffer. His secondary claims were an increase in the minimum wage will push inflation rates above a natural rate of 3%. A minimum wage increase will reduce the number of jobs available, and a minimum wage increase would decrease job diversity. In response to his first secondary claim, inflation is caused by a number of factors, not just minimum wage increase. Just a recap from Andrew's presentation, inflation is the rate at which prices rise and the value of the dollar increases. According to Kimberly Amadeo in an article titled "What are the Causes of Inflation?" she gives several main factors which cause inflation in our economy. These inflations include market power, which is the ability for a supplier to avoid competitive pressures. This is when a supplier is the only one with a certain product, so they can raise the prices as they please without the fear of actually losing their customers. Another one is demand pool inflation, which is caused when the demand for a product increases and the supply is limited. Supplier has the power to raise prices. Another one would be marketing and new technology, which states that as new technology comes out, prices for improved product rises. Of course, I'm pretty sure we all know about a decade ago, we could easily buy cell phones for less than $100. Now you're actually buying cell phones for a couple $100 that are basically computers in your hands. And then we have cost push inflation, which is the shortage of a supply, but the demand is high enough to raise prices. Two perfect examples of this are oil and water. We have a limited supply worldwide of these two products, so the supplier can actually continue to rise prices as they please. And then we have the expansion of money supply, which is based off credit, loans, and mortgages, and of course we have the raise in minimum wage inflation. So with this being said, we can't just blame the rise in inflation on minimum wage itself. So Andrew claimed that in this same claim, he claimed that raising the minimum wage would increase the natural inflation of 3%. However, according to statistics from the Department of Labor, the most recent years in which there were federal raises in the minimum wage were in 2007, 2008, and 2009, and the respective inflation rates for the corresponding years were 0.1%, negative 3.1%, which was actually a deflation, and 1.5%, which makes this argument invalid that raising the minimum wage would actually increase our inflation above 3%. So, according to his secondary claim, an increase in minimum wage would reduce the number of jobs available. However, in an article that he used titled "Effects of Raising the Minimum Wage," written by John Wibby, Wibby uses a study published in Review Economics and Statistics in which scholars Mr. Du, William Lester, and Michael Reach looked at low wage sectors in states and compared it to bordering states in the area. The study stated that strong earning effects and there were no employment effects. They only found that a slight increase in the fast food industry prices increased compared to the bordering states. Andrew also states that jobs are being taken over by autonomous businesses, which are machines to do workers' jobs. However, raising the minimum wage would have very little to do with businesses switching over to machines to do work. We are currently living in a period where technology is advancing rapidly. Regardless of minimum wage actually increasing, businesses are going to choose to switch over to technology instead of having workers. And a perfect example of this is the last raise in the minimum wage was actually in 2009, and it has only been within these past few years that we actually have seen a rapid expansion of self-checkout machines at our local stores. So in conclusion, my research on this topic has led me to the conclusion that an increase in the minimum wage will not hurt our economy. Thank you.
All right, Marvin, I think you do a nice job speaking to the audience and building some credibility as you're talking about these issues. And there's a lot of background information that you're providing. I do think that there are a couple of problems with the premises of the responses that you have, but it's also very well organized. On the first point, I'm not sure that the advocate was saying that increasing the minimum wage is the primary cause of inflation or a cause of a significant amount of inflation. And so the whole primer that you give us here on all of the different causes of inflation, well, it's interesting. It doesn't deny that wages have an impact on inflation. So there might be a question about how much of an impact they have in relationship to those other things. And I think that's where you need to develop that argument a little bit more. There was a piece of information right before you went to the second point that seemed to suggest that this was really more applicable. And that's where you had this information about deflation and it was being tied into the wages that people were being charged. I think that argument got you closer to a response that contradicts the underlying premise of the advocate than all of the other arguments do, which is kind of like background information on causes of inflation. Unless the advocate was saying the sole cause of inflation is increases the minimum wage, I think everything else is just, that's background information. If I was in the debate, I'd just get up and say, yeah, all those things cause inflation too. But none of them deny that wages cause inflation and that wages are likely to cause this amount of inflation. That's where that last piece of information that you had was directly applicable. So that was the best part of the argument. And then on the issue of jobs, it sounded to me like the evidence that you're taking on this first point comes from the same evidence that the advocate cited, but it comes up with a different or a contradictory conclusion. And so this is one of those things where there's got to be an explanation as to what's going on here, but without a reference to the advocate's original argument, it's a little bit vague, and I'm not sure what to make of it. You probably have a valid point here, but you need to explain a little bit more clearly how the advocate's evidence was being used, and then why this seems to contradict that point. Otherwise, it's another piece of evidence, but unless I was sitting here at the end of a debate, for instance, and said, well, I'm going to have to look at the evidence that you presented, the evidence the advocate presented, and see what this means, that's not always going to happen. Maybe a jury would do something like that. I'm not going to do that. I don't have enough time. Thank you. And like I said, I thought you did a nice job presenting. Thank you.